I've sometimes wondered whether the questions which the seeker has, there is no limit to it. There is no limit to the diversity of the questions which arise for the seeker. I've sometimes wondered whether there could be, if all these questions were filtered down, would it be possible that they are all based on one central question, from which arises this forest of questions? Has any of you wondered? Have you any idea about it? I came to the conclusion, open to discussion, that the question really boils down to just one. Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? Away from home. Like a child lost. What am I doing here? Away from home. Would I be right? Yes. Would you think that that is truly the bottom line question? What am I doing here? Away from home. What am I supposed to be doing? From that arises the whole lot of questions. So what am I doing from home? The question doesn't arise in deep sleep, because in deep sleep you are home. You are away from home in your individual capacities only when we are awake. Then in different words, in different concepts, the human being keeps asking himself, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing? Away from home. So the real seeking, I think, means, again, I'm open to correction, I'm open to discussion. The real question that arises is, I don't have this feeling of being away from home in deep sleep. I have that feeling in the waking state, when I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So is it possible that I can be home even in the waking state? That to me is a real seeking. Seeking enlightenment, seeking self-realization. All that truly has no meaning. Because enlightenment or self-realization, there is a lot of misconception about it. And I say this with the full awareness that what I am saying could be construed as a misconception by someone else. I am aware of that. So the misconception really is wanting something. And to me, that something is really nothing but wanting to be home, which is what happens in deep sleep. So the real question, so far as I can see, is this. How can I be home as I am in deep sleep, also in the waking state, when I'm doing my normal work? Why do you feel you are home in deep sleep? Because then you are the I who is always home, and not the me, the individual, a separate individual entity in the waking state. So the real question to me is, how can I be home, enjoying the peace of home in the waking state, not doing nothing, but apparently doing whatever I'm supposed to do every day during my working life? So what is this me away from home mean? Means separation. Separation as a separate entity. That separation does not exist in the waking state, in the deep sleep state, because this basic question, what am I doing here? Away from home, the question has always been, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing here? So the basis of the separation is doing. In deep sleep, there is only being. In the waking state, there is doing. That to me is the real difference. In the waking state, doing happens. You are away from home because you think you are doing something. So, if I could let the doing happen without thinking I am the doer, then I would be home. If I can get away from the movie, leaving the character in the movie, and come out and watch the movie, then I'm no longer concerned with the movie. In some movie, I forget which, a character is supposed to come out.
Play it again, Sam.
So at that time it seemed to me, if we can come out of the movie, out of the character we are supposed to be, and watch the movie, then as a character we would not be concerned with wanting to change what is in the movie. So I repeat, to me, the difference from being home or away from home is a feeling of doing. So really, is there me as a doer? That is what it really boils down to. And which Lord Buddha explained in such brief terms. Events happen, deeds are done. There is no individual doer thereof. And it becomes so difficult to accept it. Some time ago, when I was working, my boss took a month's leave. He was not taking leave regularly. After a long time, he took a month's leave. And when he came back, he told me in confidence, Ramesh, I thought the office would be shambles. Now I find it's running as good as ever, if not better. If I am not in charge, things will go haywire. Nothing will happen. I am in charge. You see? So, if the idea is that you are not the doer, my suggestion is try it. Try not to be the doer in the sense that watch what happens. And things will go more or less the same way. Again, the same thing happens if one is sick and is away in 2 months. Really sick. My wife was ill 2 years ago and she was in the ICU for 6 weeks. Things were going on well enough and she was quite sick, quite ill. 2 serious operations had to be done. So my nephew, who is a doctor, had a talk with her before the operations. And he said, I've asked her, told her the seriousness of the situation. And she said, go ahead. Both the operations were successful. One each consecutive days, 4 hours each. And the surgeon was a brilliant surgeon, supposed to be the number 1 in India, who was not supposed to be there in Bombay for the second operation. He was supposed to be in Pune or somewhere. But something happened, he was available, he did the operation, and it was successful. Later on, when I told her that Mahesh, or my nephew, had talked to you about the operation and he explained the whole details, what was involved, and you very bravely said, he appreciated when you said, you bravely said, go ahead. And do you know what my wife said? What nonsense. She said, what nonsense. She remembered nothing of it. She remembered nothing of it. And yet the operations went on and were successful. So my suggestion again is, you can only try it from personal experience. So from personal experience, if you did what you were supposed to do in a natural way, I'm not saying don't do anything. Continue to do whatever happens with the understanding, if possible, and I again repeat, that understanding is not in your control. So, what I'm suggesting may sound like a prescription, but it's only a description. The description being, if this happens, you will see from personal experience Buddha's words. Deeds get done. There is no individual doer thereof. That is the whole point. Now, how can that happen? That can only happen if it is the will of God and the destiny of the body-mind organism. So doing is happening from personal experience. So from personal experience, in fact, that is the only sadhana I would recommend. The sadhana being, at the end of the day, select 1 or 2 actions, investigate them, go into them, find out how did the action happen. the simplest of action. At home, I suggest, the simplest action would be this. At the end of the talk, you will want to eat. You will find yourself in a restaurant. So you said, I went to the restaurant. Find out, how did that happen? And you will probably find that you were one of a group of 6 or 7 people, and someone suggested that you get a reasonably decent meal for a reasonably decent price at such a place which is just across the corner. And there you find yourself and you say, I went to a restaurant. Or it may be that you are alone and on your way to my place, you saw the restaurant, name of the restaurant, and you said to yourself, after the talk, I'll probably come here and have a meal. So my point is, investigate any action that you think is your action. And I dare say, you will come to the conclusion, what seemed like your action turned out to be something over which you truly had no control at any stage. It happened. Another thing I would say is this. Supposing you are narrating something to a friend, something which happened, something which you think you had done 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and imagine how you would start it. Almost in every case, you would spontaneously start the recounting of that incident by saying, at such and such a time, I happened to be there. I happened to be there. That is how you spontaneously begin. Any number of actions that you can remember, my suggestion is investigate everyone that you can think, every action that you can think of which you thought was your action. And you will come to the conclusion that it was truly not your action. Now, someone asked me, who does this investigation? I said, of course, the ego does the investigation. So the ego does some other sadhana, meditation, repeating God's name. It is the ego doing it. And in this case, it is the same ego investigating actions which he thought was his or her action. The difference is only this. It is still the ego doing the sadhana. But the difference is this. In an ashram in the south, they have a system of those living at the ashram. The sadhana is to repeat the mantra. And at the end of the day, there is a man sitting there. In a queue, everybody goes and tells him how many times the mantra was repeated. And the account has been kept, I don't know for how many years. And what the effect of the total of that mantra is supposed to happen, I don't know. But it happens. And I am told, someone who was there, who lived for a while, he says, when somebody gives a high number, I did so many mantras. He said, there is pride in his voice, there is pride in his face, and waiting there to see if anyone comes anywhere near his figure. So I asked him, one of them, look, if you repeat the mantra fast enough, you will do more number of mantras. But if someone repeats the God's name with fervor, with intensity, he will find himself repeating God's name less fast, slower, with more intensity. But the number will be less. So who is doing the better kind of mantra? The one who does it with intensity, or the one wanting to have a high number? There is no answer to that. Or meditation. I meditate 4 hours a day. I meditate 12 hours a day. In that statement itself, there is pride. So the ego, which does some kind of a sadhana with a purpose, my point is that kind of sadhana inflates the ego. It makes the ego more powerful. This kind of sadhana, which is based really on Ramana Maharshi's self-inquiry. Who am I? The purpose of this investigation is exactly that. Is there a me as the doer? The me, the entity, the ego, what sustains it is the doing, the action, my action. So the difference between the two sadhanas would be this. Every day, day after day, someone increases the duration of his meditation or increases the number of his repetitions, the ego gets inflated. This way, day after day, the ego comes to the conclusion, this was not my action. No action today I could truly call my action. Is there a me at all? If there is no me doing anything, who is this me? Is there a me at all? And day after day, the ego gets weaker. So I still call it the sadhana, still done by the ego, but the effect is exactly the opposite. Until finally, the ego becomes so weak that it doesn't exist anymore. So, my point is, this being away from home is the doing of it. I am the doer. So only when the ego comes to the conclusion that he is not the doer, and if he is not the doer, who am I? And Ramana Maharshi incessantly tried to say that this self-inquiry is not an intellectual process. So he said it is not an intellectual process. And he is saying it through me. What's the doer? Find out if you are actually doing any action. And if there is no me doing any action, then the question, who am I, takes on a different intensity altogether. It no longer remains an intellectual query. From personal experience, the intellectual query becomes the very life of the query. So it doesn't, Ramana Maharshi's self-inquiry doesn't remain an intellectual query only if, from personal experience, the ego comes to the conclusion that he really has never been the doer. And this is where a lot of misconception about enlightenment or self-realization has happened. Yesterday there were several questions being asked about, in the evening, about enlightenment. The basis of all those questions was the intimate connection between the individual and enlightenment. That I could see. From the angle, how does the enlightened being behave? The misconception is that enlightenment is mistaken to be perfection. That is not so. The body-mind organism continues to function with the same programming as there was before self-realization happened. Now, Ramana Maharshi, when people went and saw him, they found him reclining on the sofa, perfectly placid, content, never getting excited. I mean, never is a strong word, but hardly ever getting excited. So, they said, this is what enlightenment brings. That was not so. That body-mind organism was always programmed to be quiet and peaceful. But the same people saw Ramana Maharshi in the evening when the chanting was going on. Ramana Maharshi's body, out of sheer habit or because it liked music, Ramana Maharshi kept keeping time with the singing, with the chanting. Then someone prepared a song or a chant based on the greatness of Ramana Maharshi. So somebody suggested that should be included in it. Ramana Maharshi said, do what you like. A person was not, where the real understanding had not happened, would have thought on different lines. He said, if you sing or chant something in praise of me, some other person could have said, where they understand, in praise, what would people think? But there was no me there. So he said, you have prepared a chant in praise of someone called Ramana. All right. Sing it, chant it. And what is more, when this chant was going on, he kept time, which is exactly like some other chant. And there were people who were shocked. He's appreciating a chanting in his own. You see. So the real misconception comes when something that happens through the body, where self-realization has happened, as that of some realized being doing something. That is where the misconception arises. Whereas, in the case of Maharaj, Nisargadatta Maharaj, my guru, the body-mind organism was programmed with a short fuse. Anger would arise fairly quickly. In one case, what happened was, I may have mentioned it yesterday or day before, I don't know, but I'll repeat it again. Someone asked a question which Maharaj thought was stupid. So he said, you have been coming here for 6 months and you ask a stupid question like that? Anger arose. Then the same man said something very funny. So Maharaj's laughter was the loudest. An ordinary person would have said, that man made me angry, therefore I shall not laugh at his joke. That wasn't so. One split second, anger arose. The next split second, laughter arose. And there was another story, an incident, not story, when I was present, which refers to my earlier guru who had an ashram in Pune. That ashram was surrounded by hutments where poor people lived, construction workers and they had children. So on a holiday, the children created a terrible row, and often there were disturbances on the road. One morning, one weekend when I was there was such a disturbance. And then my guru sent a couple of people to find out what it is, because it seemed quite close to the ashram. Then it turned out that someone who used to come to the ashram at irregular intervals, there was really a deep understanding. But he used to behave like he had no particular work. He was an older man. So he had no regular business to do, or somehow people gave him money and he lived. So he was on his way to the ashram, and someone made fun of him. Some child made fun of him. And that child expected this old man to get angry. He didn't. He also laughed along with the others. That irritated them. They poked fun at him so that he should be irritated. But there was no irritation there. He also smiled or joked, which irritated some so much, someone threw a stone at him. Then others started throwing stones, and he was injured. So when 2 people from the ashram went to him, he was injured. So they brought him into the ashram. Then they applied Dettol or something like that. They cleaned up his wounds. And in the meantime, there was a lot of grumbling going on. This happens all the time. The police should do something about it. The collector should do something about it. They are getting bad to worse. This, that. And when this grumbling was going on, this old man very quietly says, look, what has happened? He said, some hands threw stones at me. Some other hands are cleaning up the wounds. What's all the fuss about? Some hands threw stones at me and injured. Some other hands have cleaned it up. What's all the fuss about? You see? Now that was nothing to do with the programming. That had to do with the understanding. The understanding being, no one does anything. No one throws a stone at someone. No one gets hurt because a stone is thrown at someone. A stone is thrown at someone because it is the destiny of that someone to be hurt, and he will be hurt. A murder happens. What has happened? According to my interpretation, a murder had to happen because it was the destiny of one body-mind organism to be murdered. And it was the destiny of another body-mind organism to be the instrument for the murder to happen. And what happens subsequently to this action called murder, for the person who was the instrument of the murder, is again the destiny of that supposed murderer. This is what Lord Buddha had in mind when he said, actions happen. Deeds are done. There is no individual doer thereof. In other words, each action happens because it is the will of God. Consequences of that action happen because that is also the will of God. So the actions and their consequences are one movement in the functioning of consciousness or life as we know it. But we separate the two and say, he committed murder, he murdered the other man. So if we see the whole thing as one movement in consciousness, then if we are able to do it, then what happens is the judging becomes less and less. And as the judging becomes less and less, the individual doing becomes less and less. So my point is that the basis of the me is the doing. And when from personal investigation you come to the conclusion that there is truly never been a doer, then the concept of an individual doer not being there does not remain a concept, it becomes truth for that individual ego who comes to that conclusion. And that is not in your control. So to use Ramana Maharshi's words, obviously people who have come here, most of them anyway, have their heads in the tiger's mouth. And what the tiger is supposed to do, only the will of God will decide. So basically my point is, there never has been a seeker after enlightenment. Seeking after enlightenment is part of the functioning of manifestation, part of phenomenality, part of this Leela. Therefore, as I said yesterday, when God created the egos, God also started the process of destroying the egos in a limited number of cases. And yesterday some of the questions were, after enlightenment, what did you feel? After enlightenment, what did your husband or friends feel? The whole point is that enlightenment or self-realization is part of life itself. Only the event is to happen through an individual body-mind organism. Therefore, the question always is, nothing really happens as far as the individual is concerned. But events happen. As I told you the case of the old man being hurt. That was to happen, it happened. Now again, it may have been that old man could have resisted. So whether the resistance happened or not, so one morning, in identical circumstances, the old man did nothing. He suffered and came and was brought into the ashram. At another point, he might have resisted. But the point that I am making is, it was not any old man deliberately resisting or not resisting. Whether the resistance happened one morning and resistance did not happen another morning would be essentially the will of God. The individual is not concerned. And that is the only thing self-realization means. There is no individual doer. Once with my guru Nisargadatty Maharadje was concerned, there was a man who used to come there. And he came rarely, but he was very free, and Maharaj allowed him to. So he said, Maharaj, it is because of teaching like this, to accept whatever happens, that the Hindus have lost their fighting caliber and have become impotent people. Although the increase in population in India is due to these impotent Hindus. So what he himself did, he got himself converted to the Sikh religion. The Sikhs belong to the north. The average Sikh is tall and hefty because it's a warrior class. And they use an iron kadha, they call it, a sort of a bangle round it. And they wear long hair. And they wear a kirpan, which is a knife. So that's what he did. The outside appearances were there. He grew his hair long, he put on, and this man was 5 foot nothing. So it was really a ludicrous sight. So he came there one morning and again said the same, Maharaj, now let me ask you, if I come tomorrow with 6 people, with sticks, and start hammering the people in the ashram, what would you do? And Maharaj said, I don't know. And of course there was a big laugh. That day the room happened to be crowded, means probably 10 people. It was a small room. You see? But at that moment, I kept looking at Maharaj, almost without blinking, I presume. And there was huge laughter. So Maharaj asked me, why don't you laugh? Don't you think it's a good joke? Don't you also realize how deftly I've got out of the difficult question? Why don't you laugh? So I told him, Maharaj, I don't know whether it is a good joke or not. But to me, what really seemed was that is the most accurate statement I've heard in a long time. I don't know. I said, that to me, that is the most accurate statement I've heard in a long time. Maharaj knew what I meant. But the others said, what's going on between you and Maharaj? And Maharaj was a strict disciplinarian. So I had to look at him. Meaning, do I explain? So he said, go ahead. All in silence. I looked at him and he said, so I explained. Your question was a question by an individual to another individual in certain given circumstances, what you as an individual would do. And the answer came not from an individual as the doer. The answer came from an individual without the sense of doership. I don't know. Meaning, not I don't know what I shall do tomorrow, but that I don't know what will happen. You see? Whatever happens, all he knew was he wouldn't be doing it. There would be no individual to be doing whatever happened that morning. And what would happen tomorrow in a given set of circumstances, nobody could guarantee that the same thing will happen in the same given set of circumstances another day. Tomorrow, Maharaj would merely accept the beating. Day after, in the identical circumstances, he may take a stick from you and start beating you up. So he is saying, I don't know, did not mean he didn't know what he would do, but that he didn't know what would happen. You see? So the basis, essence of self-realization to me is no sense of personal doership. And if there is no sense of personal doership, there is really no question of any individual living his life differently. That is the misconception. The misconception is an enlightened man or self-realized man begins to live differently. That is not so. The behavior of a body-mind organism when self-realization has happened could normally be according to the programming in that body-mind organism, which continues to be the same. So the whole question becomes a misconception when you think in terms of a self-realized man or a woman doing something. That is where the whole misconception arises. So self-realization does not mean an individual being self-realized. Any questions?
Could you please say...
Indrani, after that. Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
Could you please say something about responsibility?
Responsibility?
Yes.
Sure.
Sure.
Yes, you said, would I say something about responsibility? And I said, sure. What do you mean by responsibility? I'm sorry, your name is?
Well, Ulrike. It's difficult.
Anyway. You don't have an Indian name by any chance, given by a master.
Yes, Niravi. There was a name given by Osho, Niravi.
Oh, you have one?
Yes, I have one.
And that is what?
Niravi.
Niradi?
Niravi.
Niravi. Niravi. Yeah. I see. Niravi. That's easier. So
yes.
Yes, Niravi. What about responsibility?
If there is no personal doer,
yes,
is there personal responsibility?
You see, now, the personal responsibility is based on consequences, isn't it? So, there is an individual who does things, who thinks she does things, responsibly or not. So the things which, an action which happens through this body, mind, organism called niravi is responsible or irresponsible from the point of view of the society. From your own point of view, from the point of view of the individual, the question of responsibility is this. We often say, so and so is a responsible person. So and so is not a responsible. What do we mean by that? We often say, so and so is a very responsible person. So and so is not a responsible person. So what about responsibility in the case of two people who are programmed differently? You see? So if someone is programmed to act responsibly, he or she cannot help acting responsibly. You see? This understanding or teaching does not alter materially the programming. So the irresponsible person continues to act irresponsibly. The responsible person continues to act responsibly. And the society and the law continue to judge each action according to the social standards of responsibility. So the answer is very simple. If you are a responsible person and you think you should act responsibly, what is to prevent you from acting responsibly? What is to prevent you from acting with a sense of responsibility? But you are programmed not to be responsible. You take things easily, more lightly. What the hell, life is too short. Then someone tells you, Virali, you have to be responsible. You are in the habit of acting irresponsibly. You say, yes, I will do that. Next time, the same thing happens. You can't help it, irrespective of the consequences. And also, you forget that if you act responsibly, you expect the consequences to be good. And if you think someone has acted irresponsibly, you expect the consequences to be bad for the person concerned. Actually, you may find the other way around. You act with a great sense of responsibility. You do something, and it happens to hurt someone or something, and the consequences are totally opposite. Or someone acts irresponsibly, and the consequences are good. So whether you act responsibly or not depends on the programming. Having acted responsibly or irresponsibly, the consequences are not in your control. The consequences are the will of God and the destiny of that body, mind, organism. So whether you act responsibly or not depends on the programming. And what the consequences will be will depend on the will of God and the destiny of the body, mind, organism. So if you think you are programmed to be a responsible person, by all means, be responsible.
Would you tell the Aksheta story?
I'm sorry?
Would you tell the Aksheta story?
Yes, you mean the prayer. Wayne says, I have a granddaughter called Aksheta. You see, she, at the age of 2 and 3, I remember an incident so well. I was going to a chiropractor many years ago. And then Akshata was a baby in arms. So my wife was holding her, and someone else was also going to the doctor. And it was a multi-storied building, lots of apartments. And when we were in one corner, and at the other corner There were children playing and lots of fun and laughter. And Akshata in my wife's arms, few months probably, 6, 7 months, so her body movement, let's go there, what are we doing here? The fun is all there. So she was driving my wife and we went there, and there were lots of children. And she enjoyed it so much, all the children came around her. Someone enjoying their fun, and she had a great time. But the problem was that this overactive child made her mother thoroughly tired at the end of the day. You see? But Akshata was a responsible child. You was a responsible. So once the mother told her, Akshata, look, I'm absolutely fagged out. You tire me so much. So Akshata looked at the mother very affectionately, kindly, and with much regret. So the mother said, look, what we'll do is this. I'll give you your bath now, and after that, after you have changed, you go to your room. This was when she was about maybe 3.5, 4. You go to your room, sit down for 5 minutes and pray to God that He make you a better girl. She listened, and agreed. I mean, she didn't want the mother to be so tired out. So she had her bath. She went came out of probably 2 minutes, but she thought 5 minutes. She came out, and the mother asked, Akshata, did you pray? He said, Mommy, I not only prayed, I prayed real hard. I prayed real hard and told God, I don't like to see Mommy so tired. Please make me a better girl. And then she went out to play. Next day, same story. You see, same story. So the mother said, Akshata, I thought you had prayed to God yesterday. She said, Mommy, I promise you, I really prayed hard. And if He hasn't made me a better girl, the 3.5-year-old child, mind you, she's now 20. She said, Mommy, I really prayed hard. And if He hasn't made me a better girl, either He can do nothing about it, or He wants me to be as I am. 3.5-year-old child with her. He wants me to be as I am. Meaning, if you are, she didn't, but I'm saying that if you are destined to be tired in the evening, you'll be tired in the evening. If it is your destiny to be tired, you will be tired, irrespective of me or anyone else. You see? So what happens is truly, truly not in our control. But that doesn't mean that we don't do what we think we should do. That is where the free will comes in. By all means, do what you think you should do. What happens is not in your control. Yes?
Now my question. There's nothing than consciousness. And I am. That means I am is the only existence. The world does not really exist, but is only a phenomenon which has come out of consciousness. And so is consciousness itself. And now my problem. Sometimes I am conscious of the world, like just now. And sometimes I am not, like in deep sleep. I cannot imagine that the world will come into existence as a phenomenon every day when I wake up in the morning, and will vanish again when I go into deep sleep in the evening. Can you explain me how it is?
I'm sorry, very, very sorry, but I didn't get the point.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't quite...
Okay. Then I will form a question.
Yes,
Yes.
sure.
Yes. Just now,
Yes.
I am conscious of the world.
You are conscious of the world,
Conscious of
yes.
Yes. And in deep sleep, I am not conscious.
Or
the
you
world.
could be unconscious of the world.
Yes, I am not
In
conscious
other
of the
words,
world.
consciousness can be there,
Yes.
and the senses work only if consciousness is there. If consciousness is suspended for any reason,
Ah, yes.
then you are not conscious of the world. Or rather, the senses are not conscious of the world if consciousness is not active. If consciousness is not active, the senses are not able to function in regard to the world.
Yes, but the world is there.
The world is there, not for you,
Yes, yes, of course.
not for you. You see, when you are in deep sleep,
Yes.
does the world exist? Not for you. So, but you say, the world doesn't exist for me when I'm in deep sleep. But the world still exists. Why? Because I can ask my neighbor who was not asleep. And he says the world existed.
Yes, of course.
That was your argument. Supposing for that matter, imagine, just imagine, that at any particular moment, all animals and human beings who are sentient beings with consciousness and senses were all asleep at the same moment. Just imagine, if everyone was asleep at the same moment, who is to say that the world existed?
Yes, nobody can say it. But
No.
does it exist? Does
So,
it exist?
Pardon?
But the question is, does it exist, even if nobody sees it?
You mean it is not conceivable that everybody is asleep at the same time?
No, this not. Yes, the question is, does the world exist even if nobody sees it? If nobody is conscious of it? Does the world exist even then if all people and all animals sleep and nobody is conscious of the world? Does it exist in this case?
You see, the point is, if nobody is conscious of the world, what world are we talking about? If no one is conscious of the world, what world are we talking about? I repeat, if no one is conscious of any world, what world are we talking about? That is exactly what I mean. There is no world. You see, the world exists because we are conscious of it. And when we say we are conscious of it, we see it, we observe it. We observe it because the eyes come in contact with its object, and because the sentience is there, the eyes are able to see it. Without consciousness, the world can be seen as an image in your eyes. The eyes are there. So what the eyes see is reflected in the eyeball. But in the absence of consciousness, the eyes don't function. So it is consciousness of sentience which enables the senses to function. Indrani, after that, this lady here.
So, Ramesh, I'm happy to be here with you. And I have a personal question since I'm sitting here. How is your body? How is your health? How do you feel?
How do I feel?
Yeah, in your body. So I want to know if your health situation is well. Your personal health.
How is my health?
Yeah.
Good enough to be here. But thank you for your inquiry.
So when I stood up, I wanted to ask another question. So when I listen to you,
Yes.
I feel always a big relief. So there is no personal doership, and I feel really relief out of it, or out of this concept. There is no personal doership. But I know in the last months of my life, I have to do every day nearly decisions, and really in my life, really big decisions. Together with my boyfriend, I built a house. So, and I feel it doesn't help me to say there is no personal doership. I have really to make these decisions, and I'm so afraid, really every day, and especially during the night, to make wrong decisions.
You see, now wait a minute.
Yeah.
You are saying that you are afraid if the situation is that you have no free will. Is that what you are saying? And
No.
I'm telling you, you do have free will.
Yeah, I see. I'm supposed to make decision in this moment.
Certainly.
If I don't do it, the house will not be built. This is pretty clear.
So, no, it isn't. You see, if you are so programmed that you are not able to make a decision, how will you make a decision?
Yeah, I'm able to, but in the same time, I'm so afraid
Yes.
to make wrong decisions.
Ah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, you have the free will to make a decision. But that is where your free will stops. And God's will begins.
Can I get rid out of the fear? I want to get rid out of the fear to make wrong decisions. Is
Yes.
it possible?
No, the answer then is to be able to accept that no consequences of any action are in your control or in anyone's control. The more certainty with which you are able to accept that will make the fear less. But on the other hand, the arising of that fear in this body-mind organism depends on the programming in this body-mind organism. In some other body-mind organism may be so programmed that that kind of fear doesn't arise. Let me tell you a story which Wayne told me. Where he lived, he had a neighbor. She was a woman whose daughter suddenly left her couple of children with her. So the grandmother had to look after the two children, and she had no job. So her financial circumstances were very difficult, and Wayne kindly used to give the children a lift to the school along with his own children. And once she accompanied him, and she tells about her fears. You know what the fears were? She said, Wayne, I can't sleep nights. And do you know why? Not because she had no money for the children, or no, that was not the problem. The problem was she was afraid that Saddam Hussein might drop a bomb on the house. That's what she was afraid that Saddam Hussein might drop a bomb on her house. You see, so fears can be all kinds. However far-fetched, they can worry you, you see. You see, I'll tell you a joke about this worrying. There was a man, a businessman, a Jewish businessman. he couldn't sleep nights. He kept tossing in his bed. So the wife says, "What are you bothering about? Why aren't you sleeping?" So this businessman says, "My note falls due tomorrow, and I don't have the money to pay for it." And the wife says, "If you are not able to pay for it, let him toss in his bed. Why are you tossing in your bed?"
Then it's not in my hand if I'm afraid or not.
That is correct. That is quite correct. And that is where the difference lies. This is exactly where the question of the full understanding or self-realization or enlightenment happens. Fear arises. You see, there are two people. Just say the two people. A sage meaning a body-mind organism in which self-realization or enlightenment has happened. The understanding is there. And in another case is the ordinary person. Now, both of them see something and both are programmed in such a way that in both cases fear arises. So fear can arise even in a body-mind organism called a sage. And of course also in the ordinary case. Where is the difference? Where does the self-realization, enlightenment come in? Do you know where it comes in? It comes in this way. The ordinary man says, "I have always been timid. It made me ashamed of myself. I would like to be brave like my friend. But every time something happens, I am afraid and he is not." That is what the ordinary man says. The timid man says, "All right, this body-mind organism is programmed to be timid and will do whatever is necessary in the circumstances. So if this body-mind organism is attacked and is timid, this body-mind organism will run away. But there will be no reaction to that reaction of fear by saying, in the first case he says, I was afraid. I don't want to be afraid. In the case of a sage, the arising of the fear will be witnessed as a mere reaction of the brain to an event, which was the input. The involvement to the original reaction, I am a timid man, will not arise in the case of a sage. The sage will say, this body-mind organism is programmed to be timid. Many thousands of body-mind organisms are also programmed to be timid. They will be timid body-mind organisms. Nothing to be done about it.
So then the judgments about myself and my actions will be stopped.
That is correct.
But I can't do the stop, so the stop comes.
Yeah, so that is why I said, if you are able to, if you remember, I kept saying, if you are able to, and the ability is not in your hands. You see? So, either you get involved or you don't get involved. That is not in your control. And if the involvement happens, I am not saying that the involvement will never happen in the case of a sage. Involvement may happen. But in that case, that involvement is accepted. Having accepted the involvement, what happens is the happening of the involvement and getting cut off because of the understanding of the sage happen at the same time. So, if involvements happen, my suggestion to you would be, if you are able to accept even the involvement. The problem arises because you say, I am involved. I don't want to be involved. That is the involvement with the involvement. You see, I keep getting involved. I don't want to be involved. More involvement. But you say, all right, the involvement happens and will continue to happen so long as it is God's will, over which I have no control. So let the involvement happen. Then even the involvement is accepted. You see?
Thank you very much.
And with this acceptance, what is likely to happen, with this acceptance of the involvement, the further happening of the involvement will probably be less and less until the involvement doesn't happen anymore.
I want to go back to the example you were giving with Nisargadatty Maharadje. He
Yes.
said he wasn't sure what was going to happen.
I'm sorry?
He didn't know. When those 6 men came into the hall
Yes.
with the clubs,
Yes.
he didn't really know what would happen.
Oh yes, he did not know
No, he did not know.
what would happen.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. But since it was Nisargadatty Maharadje who was manifesting what is, was he actually at that moment confident, but completely confident, that he would be reflecting the will of God? And so whatever happened would be an action of compassion, would be an action of wisdom. So is that what gives the sage the confidence to be able to say whatever they say with such confidence, knowing that their consciousness does reflect the will of God? And I mean, in other words, it's a question about once you are wide open, awake, whatever the word, you are then reflecting the will of God?
There is no you.
Okay, there is a reflection. The instrument reflects.
So the instrument reflects. And what the instrument will reflect at what time, there is no one concerned. What that instrument will reflect at what time, there is no individual to be concerned about it. Let the reflection happen, whatever happens. Therefore, he said, if the resistance happens, it will happen. If at another moment resistance doesn't happen, it will not happen. There is no one to be concerned about what happens.
I'm beginning to see that. So, but it seems to me there's a difference, real distinction between who cares and there is courage, there is confidence, there is clarity, there is some kind of reflectiveness. That seems to be a little different than just who cares.
You see, therefore, what the misconception which I mentioned earlier is this, that you expect an enlightened being to be perfect, wise, courageous, all these words that you used. You see? So the misconception is, you, after enlightenment, you expect the enlightened person to be a perfect being, which is not so. That being continues to be and function according to the programming which continues. Therefore, you take 6 people where understanding has happened and it is accepted, and you will find their behavior so different, so you find nothing common between the behavior of 6 people where enlightenment has happened. Why? Because the behavior has nothing to do with the understanding. The behavior depends almost entirely on the programming.
So then, for example, the Buddhist view that no matter what your behavior in the programming and the body-mind computer, you would still be the manifestation of compassion and wisdom is not something you believe.
I'm sorry, but the wisdom...
Yeah, that no matter what your behavior based on your programming would be, that you would still be acting with some kind of compassion or some kind of wisdom.
No, there will be no you acting at all.
Right. But this wouldn't be coming through you just naturally on the basis of your awakening process.
So, whether wisdom will prevail at any point, there is no individual concern. Whatever happens, happens according to God's will. That is the basic, total understanding. So whether something happens is good for some and bad for some, which is usually the case, an event happens, which is good for some and not so good for others. And that continues. And the man of understanding is truly not concerned who benefits and who doesn't, because he says only those benefit whose destiny it is to benefit. Those who do not benefit, because it is not their destiny to benefit. You see? The sage, therefore, does not take sides. He accepts whatever happens. See, there's a lady came to me, lot of worries, lot of disturbances. I don't know why someone who sent her should not have sent her, because the lady who sent her knew that I was neither a counselor nor a therapist. So I could only keep on repeating the understanding. You see? And she got angry. She got mad. So she says, Ramesh, it's all right for you living in this comfortable place, having had a good job, having a certain amount of comfortable money. You are comfortable, and therefore you can afford to have this teaching. Meaning, I have not had my share of grief, life's grief, which she has had in ample measure. And therefore, she cannot accept the teaching. She is not supposed to accept the teaching. I give this teaching because I have had a comfortable life. You see? So I told her, I am not saying that I have had the worst possible life. No. This body, mind, organism has been destined to have many good things of life. But it has also had the destiny of suffering many of the bad things of life. So I gave him an example. I said, my elder son, when he was a baby, had eczema, skin problem. And we were warned that if the skin problem is treated, it may almost certainly, it will convert itself into asthma. But the problem was so bad, we had to take the risk. So we had it treated and expected it turned into asthma. So the result was that in the night, I or my wife had to sit in a rocking chair. He couldn't sleep, so we used to have the child in our lap. You see? And we had a veranda open to the sky. So this child, again 3.5 years old, you see, was aware that because of him, his parents have to lose sleep. So he would watch the constellation in the sky and watch a group of stars gradually moving out, you see. And this 3.5-year-old child was to console me, saying, look, that constellation is here. In a very short time, it will go there. Then there will be light. And we can all go to sleep. A 3.5-year-old child. And he had this asthma throughout. You see? So then, I have a daughter who is married and settled in Bangalore. She has a problem with her husband. 2 problems. One, he has a problem with alcohol. And 2, he is an extraordinarily generous man without being financially able to be generous. You see? So what he did once was, when she was away, and they have a farm where they have a number of people, very poor people, farm laborers. See? So some woman came when my daughter was away, and she wanted something, some keys for something. So he gave her the keys. But seeing her so tattered clothes, he goes, opens my daughter's cupboard, takes out the first sari that comes and gives it to her. And that happens to be a very valued sari. So she has had this problem with her husband for many years. So, having a suffering daughter obviously meant suffering for us too. So I told her we had suffering where our elder child was concerned, we had problem with our daughter, and we still lived in the same comfortable house. You see? So we've had our share of grief, and we've had our share of good fortune. Then she didn't know what to say, this woman who thought that I could afford to give this teaching because of having had a comfortable life. So the degree of comfort is also a matter of comparative appreciation. That's why where you hear the first day, I read out the happiest people in the world. You see? So my interpretation of that report is the wealth and happiness or content go at the bottom, the money, the comfort, the happiness and the money go together. Then they level off. And after that, money and they go for, after a point, money does not bring happiness. That's what the report said. But up to a point, money is important. Therefore, you will never find me discounting the importance or value of money. Maybe because I've been a banker for 37 years. Yes.
Ramesh, you said something before about judgment and guilt and the society. So I'm very interested about your opinion about laws and if they are necessary.
Yes.
And how shall society work with social rules?
With social?
Rules.
Rules.
Rules. So
Look,
whether they are necessary or not.
Society has made the social rules. It is the society which has made the social rules and the legal system which has made the legal laws. So the society and the law function according to their own regulations.
But law is working with guilt. So you say there's no guilt.
Yes. So what your question boils down to is this. Correct me if I'm wrong. Herbert? Herbert. So what Herbert says is this. I have done something. Herbert thinks, I have done something which has caused damage. So the law is proceeding against me for the damage. But I know, I'm told, that no action is my action. So if that action which has caused damage is not my action, why am I, Herbert, being punished? That is your question, isn't it?
It's one part of the question, but it's very interesting.
So you didn't know this was your real question? But this is your question. I have not done anything. My teacher tells me so. If I have not done anything, why should I be punished? The answer is, Herbert, the law is not punishing you because you don't exist. whom does the law punish? The law punishes that body-mind organism whose destiny it was for that action to happen, which caused damage. So the first action happening, which caused damage, happened because it was the destiny of this body-mind organism for that action to happen. And the consequences of that action, legal action, are also the destiny of the same body-mind organism.
Thank you for that, but the main question for me is there are different systems of law. Let's say in the United States we have a death trap, something, Todesstrafe, I don't know what it in English is.
Sure.
Huh? Penal punishment. And we have a discussion that this is not in Europe the state of social culture.
Quite right.
So there must be a decision made what is right and what is wrong.
So what is right and what is wrong is according to the law of the country. And even
which
morality.
law is more right?
You see, so again, it's a matter of comparative. You see, you can say Europe is wiser than America. Now, in India, do you know what is happening? In America, I believe, I'm open to correction, that there is a constitutional provision that an American who is not born in America cannot be the president of the country. You see? In India, the constitution does not provide that. So there is a chance of an Italian-born woman becoming the prime minister of the country. And people are saying, you see how wise the America has been. They have protected such things from happening. We must also have it. So they will continue. And whether that provision comes in the Indian constitution or not will depend on God's will. It was God's will that the American Constitution has that provision. It was not God's will that the Indian Constitution have that. But whether in future they will have it is again God's will. You see, now, right and wrong, even that is not really stable, is it? For instance, abortion was a crime in almost every country until very few years ago. And now, the third world governments are sponsoring abortion with advertisements, free abortion clinics for the poor women. So, is abortion right or is abortion wrong? Abortion was right in certain circumstances, wrong in some. You see? Now, third world countries are supporting abortion, which only a few years ago was a crime. So what is right? What is wrong? Who knows? Well, shall we make that the last question or comment?
Okay.
Sure.
My question is about, it's again a bit back to the programming. We can't assume anything, because even if you say that this person has been a timid person all their life, and this person has been courageous, you can't really assume anything. Nothing can be assumed because anything can change with the conditioning.
Wait a minute. Anything can happen if it is the will of God.
Right, right.
Anything can happen if it is the will of God. So if it is the will of God that a timid person at a certain point loses his timidity, maybe some therapy will help you. Or it may not, depending on God's will. So nothing can happen unless it is God's will. And anything can happen if it is God's will. So if it is God's will that this kind of programming be changed, it could be changed.
And leading on to intuition, like
I'm sorry?
Intuition.
Yes.
Somebody, the mind-body organism that says, like my husband said when he was in his early 20s, he says, I'm going to die fast and I'm going to die young. And so there was a knowing or an intuition about that. And at 41, he did indeed die fast and young. So
this is the intuition, like the knowing. I'm seeing that the sage lives very much in the present moment, or experiences the present moment, not the future or the past.
Yes, but
the ordinary person.
Wait a minute. Are you saying then, or are you asking me a question? Does the sage or a man of understanding have better intuition? Is that what you're saying?
No, but I guess it's like trusting the intuition or knowing that, because in any given moment anything can change.
Yeah.
So it's really about relaxing into absolutely everything.
Let me tell two things. One, the existing of that intuition is a gift from God. So intuition exists in a particular body-mind organism because it is the will of God. And whether the intuition works for your benefit or not is again the will of God. You see? The existence of the intuition is the will of God. Consequences of that intuition are also the will of God. So it is not that intuition will work for the benefit of that body-mind organism every time. You do something on an impulse. So there again, what is impulse and what is intuition? There is a very fine distinction. So, if someone is lucky enough for her guesses to turn right, people will say, she has good intuition. You see? And someone who has intuition and works on that intuition and gets into a lot of losses, she says, that person is impulsive. You see? So it's a play on words.